This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. United States Congressman Mickey Leland of Texas and his party are still missing in Ethiopia. Privately, U.S. officials say after 5 days, hope is fading. Publicly, fear and frustration among Leland's family and colleagues are growing. Some of them are openly critical of the pace, scope, and quality of the search. The latest air and ground searches in rough terrain and bad weather failed to find any sign of the Leland party or their plane. Our coverage begins with Peter Schweitzer, our man in Ethiopia.
A powerful United States rescue force, from giant C-5 transports to mid-air refuelable Black Hawk helicopters, is being assembled here in Ethiopia, but it may be too late. Congressman Mickey Leland and the 15 others on his plane have been missing since Monday. Every hour that passes reduces the chances for their survival. When the search resumed this morning, pilots were optimistic that the plane had been located. A U.S. weather satellite had identified 2 distress signals believed to come from the downed plane. But a thorough search of the area north of Addis Ababa and another area to the south found nothing. The aircraft were redirected by rescue officials to follow the original route Leland and his party would have taken. They scoured a 500-mile-long corridor without success.
After 10 hours in the air, the C-130s returned to the airport. A day that started in hope ended in disappointment.
The military believed that the sophisticated electronics on the C-130s would easily pick up the automatic distress signal from the missing plane. That didn't happen, and now the transmitter batteries may have died.
Now we don't have the advantage of having somebody beeping up at us. We got to go in there and do a very thorough visual search.
The embassy officials said the U.S. has decided to bring in more planes, more crews, and more support facilities. 300 U.S. military personnel are expected on the ground here by tomorrow.
I think that this operation has proved to be a hell of a tougher nut to crack than anybody expected.
2 close colleagues of Mickey Leland, Congressman Gary Ackerman and Alan Wheat, arrived in Addis Ababa today. They said the U.S. is still not doing enough and tried to believe that their friend is still alive.
It's just a gut feeling that we have that under any set of circumstances, Mickey's personality would be one that says push on.
The rescue effort will push on again tomorrow. But the weather forecast calls for clouds, thunderstorms, and limited visibility. And that weather is expected to hold over the next few days. Peter Schweitzer, CBS News, Addis Ababa.
After search planes returned from another fruitless day, President Bush tried to sound hopeful that Congressman Mickey Leland and his 15 fellow passengers will be found alive.
I can understand the concern that people that love Mickey Leland feel and that I feel, but there's a lot going on, and so let's just hope and pray he's okay.
Privately, officials say it is unlikely the plane's passengers could have survived this long. Among members of Leland's staff, dissatisfaction with the search effort is beginning to show.
But it just seems to me that with all of the sophisticated surveillance that we have, with all of the sophisticated equipment we have, we could have and should have located them by now.
The White House called it the largest search operation in memory, and the Pentagon produced the hourly cost for some of the aircraft involved. $5,400 for the giant C-5 transport, $686 for each of the Black Hawk helicopters. The U-2 spy plane took pictures of a 40,000 square mile area, but nearly half of it was covered by clouds. The U.S. weather satellite has made 2 more passes over Ethiopia without detecting any emergency signals. Even if Leland's plane had somehow landed safely in the rugged terrain, the passengers would be running out of provisions by now.
The provisions that were on the Leland aircraft were a boxed lunch for each member of the party, 1 or 2 cases of soft drinks, and 3 to 5 gallons of water. The aircraft also carried the standard emergency medical kit.
The search resembled the 1972 search for the plane carrying House Majority Leader Hale Boggs and 1 other congressman. That plane went down in Alaska and never was found. That search went on for 5 weeks before it was called off. A White House official says there's no thought yet of calling off the search for Mickey Leland. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
Upbeat economic reports today helped ease fears of both inflation and recession. The government reported that wholesale prices fell in July, the 2nd straight monthly decline, and retail sales shot up, sign of a growing economy. Correspondent Richard Roth reports the news sent the dollar soaring.
It wasn't just surprising news, it was surprisingly good news, like an early morning shot of adrenaline in the market where currencies are traded, a healthy sign for the U.S. economy.
Right now, I'd say the feeling about the dollar is one of euphoria. The dollar has made a tremendous up move.
For a while, the stock market surged too, flirting with a record high in a forget-your-troubles rally, fueled by the drop in wholesale prices and the rise in retail sales. Twin signs that the economy's in balance between inflation and recession. By the close, though, the Dow Jones average had rolled back more than 28 points on volume of almost 200 million shares. These were the numbers that caused the excitement, a jump in retail sales of almost a point, an indicator the economy hasn't completely stopped growing, and a drop in the producer price index of 0.4%, the biggest monthly drop in 3 years.
The decline in the producer price index today means that inflation has peaked and that interest rates are probably headed lower. That's good news for the consumer and also the stock market.
But in the price and sales figures, there was also a lesson on how much the U.S. economy is driven by the auto industry. Cuts in costs for gasoline and new cars were the big factors in the drop in wholesale prices. But the reason car prices were cut was sluggish sales. Manufacturers' rebates have helped turn that around, and that's a big reason retail sales were up. Car sales have improved. Take away autos, and the picture isn't quite so good.
Consumers are spending, but they're spending cautiously. The trend on retail sales is a very sluggish trend.
And sluggish is the word several analysts were using today, explaining why they're not convinced the economy is out of danger. As long as economic growth stays slow in consumer spending, housing, and industrial output, recession is a risk that won't disappear. Dan?
Richard, thanks. Still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News. Susan Spencer on new danger from an old disease that vaccine had beaten. And Bob Faw on new doubts about using dolphins as swimming pool playmates. Public health officials haven't seen anything like it in years. A nationwide outbreak of measles, a highly contagious yet highly preventable disease. Vaccines have been available for more than a quarter of a century, but as CBS News medical correspondent Susan Spencer reports, a lot of American young people are not getting their shots.
Due to the outbreak of measles, we urge parents of children from 6 months to 5 years of age to immunize their children.
In Chicago today, the message blared forth loud and clear: get vaccinated against measles. Cause for alarm, nationwide, the number of cases of measles is up 370% over last year.
This is the largest measles outbreak in almost a decade. There are almost 9,000 cases reported through August.
The hardest hit areas, Texas, California, and now Illinois, where health officials are working feverishly to contain measles, a disease they thought they'd licked with vaccine. But especially among the poor, too few kids get vaccinations. So far, around the country, 29 people have died. So in Chicago's inner city, bilingual health workers have been scouring neighborhoods, handing out flyers, offering free shots. There are long, long lines.
What we had in Chicago was a growing group of susceptible preschoolers. And when the virus got into that group of kids, it spread very quickly.
It's highly communicable. Someone who's in a waiting room an hour after a patient has left can even pick up measles.
The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 2 vaccinations, one at 15 months, one at junior high school. In outbreak areas, it also suggests booster shots for adults under 32.
This is not a rite of passage. This is basically a serious illness that can be prevented.
It's a disease that would cause encephalitis or brain fever in 1 in 2,000 and could kill.
This year's problem doesn't compare to the years before vaccine, when hundreds of thousands of people got the measles. But health officials say they're worried that this outbreak hasn't peaked yet. And even in the bad old days, summer was supposed to be a slow time for the measles. Susan Spencer, CBS News, Washington.
We reported last night how the AIDS epidemic in this country is threatening the very financial survival of hospitals. Thanks partly to Glasnost, the true extent of the AIDS crisis in the Soviet Union is finally coming out. Correspondent Bill McLaughlin in Moscow reports tonight how some antiquated Soviet hospitals are doing more harm than good in fighting this terrible disease.
These Russians are victims of AIDS, even the babies, victims of what medical authorities here say is an epidemic.
Soviet authorities are just beginning to realize that they may be losing the war against AIDS. While in the West, people infected with AIDS go to hospitals to be treated, here, hospitals have infected hundreds, perhaps thousands of patients with the AIDS virus. The poorly equipped Soviet medical system has helped to spread AIDS throughout this country.
Soviet officials misjudged the whole thing. They brazenly lied. Knowing the real situation, they brazenly lied to our faces. And of course, this was a crime because we lost several years.
According to the critics, the state committed the crime by not providing hospitals with the tools to prevent AIDS. There's a near total absence of disposable syringes, proper sterilization, and AIDS testing equipment that works.
We don't have enough equipment. I can say that the whole country lacks the necessary amount of disposable medical equipment, so we can't guarantee that there won't be infections in hospitals.
The terrible part is that our medical personnel is forced to consciously infect people because they have no other choice.
At this AIDS clinic, researchers work with broken test tubes. Just a scratch can mean infection with the virus for the doctors and nurses. Young people in the Soviet Union, just beginning to taste some freedom, are also becoming a high-risk group. Soviet sex education is woefully inadequate. Soviets who know they should use condoms can't find any. They were impossible to find at this pharmacy, one of the biggest in Moscow.
We don't have condoms here. They're very hard to find.
The number of Soviet AIDS cases is increasing. For victims like Sergei, life is especially difficult.
Society spits on us. There's nothing to do but waste away here.
But this week, in an extraordinary appeal published in Pravda, the Soviet Health Ministry pleaded for people to donate Western currency to help the government buy equipment in the West to fight the spread of AIDS in the Soviet Union. Bill McLaughlin, CBS News, Moscow.
U.S. federal authorities in Texas today ordered the brother-in-law of former Mexican President Luis Echeverria Alvarez held as a material witness to the murder of a U.S. narcotics agent. Ruben Zunio Arce was arrested in San Antonio and ordered taken to California. He's wanted as a witness at the trial in Los Angeles of defendants charged with the 1985 kidnap torture killing of U.S. Drug Enforcement agent Enrique Camarena in Mexico.